Okay, this one's probably going to get me a little bit of hate. Today I want to tell you a little bit about why coal is the go-to energy of the 18th century and is something of the past. And I don't have time to go into a lot of detail about everything as far as energy sources in comparison, so I'm going to focus on just your big three fossil fuels here and compare them to each other: coal, petroleum, and natural gas. And just from the get-go, I'll tell you, coal is caveman technology. Petroleum is on its way out. Gas is now, and probably some sort of renewables are the future. I'm not going to go off into the renewables because that can take up more than 15 minutes just by itself. Now, I have experience as a mechanic. I was basically an overglorified mechanic for 6 years in the United States Navy. I've actually gone through training to actually test the flash point of the diesel fuel marine that they use in boilers and all kinds of other crazy stuff, so I've got a little bit of knowledge about what the hell I'm talking about here. Now, a coal-fired plant, if everything is the same cost per BTU coming to your doorstep in its raw form, that's the comparison I'm going to make. Coal, there's no real way of refining it, being that it's a solid. You're kind of limited on what you can chemically or by distillation, which is what they do with petroleum products, what you can do as far as impurities. Some coal is cleaner, some coal is dirtier, depending on where you took it out of the ground, and you're basically stuck with what you got. Now, and I'm sure there's processes to try leaching things out, but I'm just saying it's a lot more complicated than it is for a liquid or a gas. Coal, being a solid, when you burn it, it leaves behind ash. It also tends to put a coating on whatever, the combustion chamber, we'll say. Usually this is a boiler. It would be boiler tubes. That's basically how the old steam locomotives ran. It was a boiler. They had a piston type engine on them. Most modern things are steam powered. The boiler heats up water, makes it into steam. Steam goes through a turbine, condenses back into water, and goes round and round. Don't want to go into the steam cycle too far here, but just your tubes in the boiler tend to get all cruddy when you burn coal, and you're going to have to go in there and clean them. Coal produces ash. The ash is a hazardous substance in and of itself. It can contain things like mercury and all kinds of other nasty things. Sometimes they do use it as an additive in concrete. There's a place nearby that uses the ash as a synthetic form of gypsum to create drywall. There's a lot of things they've tried to find useful things for it, but in general, you have a waste product from this combustion process that you have to get rid of somewhere. Environmental laws are being left out of this. I'm just saying, if no environmental laws, that's part of why even on back into the 1930s, locomotives were switching over to diesel. There's just more maintenance for a coal-fired combustion process, flat out. And no matter what they say about clean coal, you still have something to get rid of. You can look at, oh yeah, this is lower sulfur content, so it's not polluting the air. You still have byproducts to get rid of, to do something with. So it's complicated. And you've got to take that into consideration as a black mark against coal. That's why the world has, for the most part, moved on. The only places that still use coal is just because it's cheap enough in comparison to offset that cost of the added maintenance and disposal. Now, moving on to petroleum products. Petroleum products in their raw form still don't burn all that clean. So you have soot to deal with. Usually you have some sort of a, you got to pump it to move it around and things like that. It takes a little bit more. And that's another thing with coal. You got to move it around. It's a solid. You can't just put it in a pipe and send it somewhere unless, they make a slurry with water, but then the water kind of offsets part of your combustion. And like I said, it's complicated, but natural gas, you can pressurize a pipe. The pressure is the same throughout the pipe. That's just how a gas works compared to a liquid. A liquid, you got to pump it up over hills and whatever, and you usually got to spray it as a mist to get it to burn at a decent rate at any rate. So you've got a power input that's needed there, and also unrefined petroleum products are going to have a certain amount of soot build up as well because of all the impurities. That's why, that's kind of phasing out too. And part of the cost of petroleum products is the fact that normally things don't burn crude oil. They burn normally something roughly diesel. Jet fuel is roughly diesel. The diesel engines used on an aircraft carrier for the tractors, etc., actually run on jet fuel. Jet fuel and diesel fuel are very close. Heating oil, kerosene, they're all basically in the same ballpark as far as their properties. So that's basically what they usually use to fire a boiler. And we're basically talking about power production here, not so much, internal combustion engines or cars. Obviously, there's no coal-fired cars to begin with, but at any rate, the petroleum products, normally to get it to be fairly clean and everything, you've got to have some sort of refining. When you refine it, you're adding cost of the process, and you're also adding, you have a waste stream then. That's the whole petrochemical industry is basically generated by trying to make useful products out of this waste stream. So, there is that argument there that certain other things are being made from the byproducts, but at the same time, it has its issues too, much better than coal. And that was basically the 20th century was the era of oil. And we come to now, and the big thing now, and it can even be used in vehicles, although it's not very widespread yet except for in certain fleet vehicles, is natural gas. Natural gas, it's still a fossil fuel, it still adds to greenhouse gases, much cleaner. It comes out of the ground basically pure in most cases. Being a gas, it leaves most of the other contaminants behind when you extract it. And if anything's with it, it's a lot easier to clean it up because you can clean it up more or less by physical processes. You don't have to treat it with chemicals. You don't have to, distill it and it's called fractional distillation, what they usually do for petroleum products. They heat it up and, different things condense at different temperatures, and that's how they separate them out. But you don't have to do that much with natural gas, even if it does have impurities. So that's why I think natural gas is the fossil fuel of now. And I mean, looking forward, there's a cost of extraction for all of these. And, I've left out that cost of extraction. Obviously, I think going in there and mining is much more labor intensive and cost intensive than drilling a well and the oil or the gas just comes out. And then there's, alternative methods that they've been coming up with as far as fracking and going offshore that add different costs and that. And, you can go down the rabbit hole pretty far on any one of these, but I just wanted to give an overview of these three. And, the biggest argument against coal, leaving air pollution, acid mine drainage, everything else aside, is it is a much less efficient fuel. And I'll leave it at that. See you on the next one.